Have you ever felt like your sacrifices for your family have gone unnoticed? Like your worth is only measured by what you can do for others, rather than who you are as a person? Many of us, especially women, find ourselves pouring endless love, time, and energy into our families, only to feel invisible in return. What if you could take a step back, reclaim your peace, and start living life on your terms? Imagine letting go of the weight of unreciprocated sacrifices and embracing the freedom to prioritize your happiness. This video is for anyone who has ever questioned the value of their family ties, grappled with the pain of feeling unappreciated, or wondered if it's time to make the tough decision to put themselves first. Today, we'll explore the emotional journey of Mary Thompson, a devoted mother and wife who spent decades putting her family's needs before her own. Like so many women, Mary struggled with being ignored, mistreated, and undervalued by those closest to her. Her story is one of heartbreak, resilience, and ultimately, transformation. Through her experiences, you'll learn how she found the courage to fight for her happiness, set firm boundaries, and rewrite the narrative of her life. Mary's journey was not an easy one. It was filled with agonizing decisions, moments of doubt, and a deep longing for change. But her determination to reclaim her worth and live authentically paved the way for a fulfilling life. By the end of this video, you'll understand why recognizing your value, prioritizing your well-being, and walking away from toxic relationships are not acts of selfishness but of survival and self-love. We hope Mary's story will inspire you to find the strength to pursue your happiness, no matter the obstacles. Sometimes, the hardest choice is also the one that sets you free. And as you'll see, choosing yourself doesn't mean abandoning love or responsibility. It means redefining it on your terms. If this message resonates with you, please don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss future videos. Your support means the world to us, and if you found this video meaningful, please take a moment to like it and share it with others who might need to hear Mary's story. And now, we'd love to hear from you. If you find the topic of this video helpful or relatable, comment 1. If there's something you feel we could improve, let us know by commenting 0. Your feedback is invaluable as we strive to create content that truly connects with you. Let's dive into Mary's story and uncover the powerful lessons that await. Firstly, there's no need to complain about unfilial children because they can also manage their own lives. It's a sentiment many parents wrestle with as they grow older. After years of sacrifice and raising children into adulthood, there's an unspoken hope that those same children will step in to provide care and support in return. But life rarely unfolds in a straight line, and the reality is often more complex than our expectations. If you've reached your 70s and find that your children don't visit often or aren't financially able to help you, it's easy to feel hurt or even angry. However, before resentment takes root, it's worth pausing to consider the pressures they might be facing. Take Linda Carson, for example. Now 72, she once envisioned a peaceful retirement surrounded by her 3 children and their families. But as the years went on, she realized that each of them was juggling their challenges: mortgages, car payments, childcare, and demanding jobs. At first, I felt ignored, Linda admits. I wondered if they had forgotten everything I did for them when they were young. But then, I realized their silence wasn't about neglect. It was about survival. In today's fast-paced, high-pressure world, many middle-aged adults are caught in what's often called the sandwich generation. They're squeezed between the needs of aging parents and their children, with financial and emotional resources stretched thin. Monthly paychecks often vanish into mortgages, student loans, and basic living expenses, leaving little room for additional support. It's not a matter of unwillingness, it's a matter of reality. As parents, it's natural to expect gratitude and care, but it's equally important to recognize that our children are only human. They're doing their best to navigate a world that's far more financially and emotionally demanding than the one we raised them in. By choosing to understand their struggles rather than judge their shortcomings, we can build stronger, more compassionate relationships. Instead of harboring disappointment, consider shifting your focus inward. At 70, It's time to reduce expectations from your children and begin prioritizing yourself. Discover new hobbies, explore interests you never had time for before, or join local groups that align with your passions. Whether it's gardening, painting, volunteering, or yoga, finding activities that enrich your spirit can bring joy and fulfillment that isn't tied to anyone else. Linda, for example, joined a community art class, something she had always wanted to try but never made time for. It gave me a new sense of purpose, she shares. And funny enough, as I became happier and more independent, my kids started calling more often. I think they could sense the shift in me. The key to a peaceful and happy old age lies in releasing unrealistic expectations and embracing the freedom to live for yourself. Your children will care in their own way when they're able, but your happiness should never hinge entirely on their ability to provide it. By focusing on your growth and well-being, you set an example for them, a reminder that life is meant to be enjoyed at every stage. So, take a deep breath, let go of what you can't control, and make the most of this chapter. After all, you've earned it. Secondly, don't get angry over minor matters. It's unnecessary to be upset over trivial issues in life. Life after 70 should be a time of reflection and peace, not one of frustration or anger over the little things. Yet, it's so easy to let minor irritations pile up, an offhand comment from a friend, a meal that doesn't hit the spot, or the noisy energy of grandchildren disrupting your afternoon nap. While these moments may seem significant at the moment, holding on to them only harms you in the long run. As the old saying goes, anger harms the liver, sorrow harms the heart, and worry and fear harm life. Take Eleanor James, for instance. Now 74, she often found herself irritated by small things, a neighbor's loud music, her husband Frank's forgetfulness, or even the way her daughter left shoes scattered around the house during visits. I'd spend hours stewing over these things, Eleanor recalls. It was exhausting, and honestly, it didn't change anything. I finally realized I was only hurting myself. At 70, you've weathered enough storms to know that life is far too precious to waste on anger. When small annoyances creep in, ask yourself, does this truly matter in the grand scheme of things? Most of the time, the answer will be no. The truth is, holding on to anger isn't just emotionally draining, it's physically damaging. Chronic stress and anger take a toll on your health, increasing the risk of heart problems, high blood pressure, and even weakened immunity. Why let a passing frustration steal your peace or put your health at risk? If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 1 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Instead, focus on cultivating a calm and tolerant mindset. If someone's behavior bothers you, and you can avoid confrontation, choose to let it slide. This doesn't mean suppressing your feelings, but rather deciding what's worth your energy. For Eleanor, this shift made all the difference. I started practicing deep breathing when I felt upset and asked myself if this would matter a year from now, she explains. 9 times out of 10, it wouldn't. Living with an open heart and a relaxed mind transforms not just your mood but your overall experience of life. Eleanor recounts how she began to see her husband's forgetfulness not as an annoyance but as a quirk of aging that they could laugh about together. He might misplace the car keys, but now we turn it into a game, she chuckles. It's amazing how much better life feels when you stop taking things so seriously. If you encounter someone who consistently annoys you or drains your energy, consider creating a bit of distance. This isn't about avoiding conflict, but about prioritizing your well-being. Remember, you're not responsible for fixing every relationship or pleasing everyone. Sometimes, the most loving act is to give yourself the gift of peace. As you move forward, aim to meet life's small frustrations with humor and patience. Whether it's a spilled drink, a forgotten appointment, or a thoughtless comment, remind yourself, this too shall pass. By choosing peace over anger, you create space for joy and health to flourish. After all, a relaxed mind and a forgiving heart make the path ahead smoother, and so much brighter. Thirdly, there's no need to strive for longevity. Sometimes living too long isn't necessarily a good thing. There's a certain wisdom that comes with age, a recognition that birth, aging, illness, and death are all part of the natural cycle of life. We cannot escape these truths. What we can control, however, is how we live, and whether we live joyfully and meaningfully. Striving for a longer life isn't always the path to fulfillment. Sometimes, living in the moment and embracing the quality of life you have is far more important than extending it at all costs. Take Dorothy Miller, for example. At 73, she had spent most of her life focusing on making sure her family was provided for. But in her later years, she began to obsess over overextending her life. "I spent so much money on supplements, special diets, and health plans that I wasn't even enjoying my days anymore," she recalls. "It got to the point where I was more concerned about living longer than I was about living well." Dorothy's story is all too common among older adults who fear the end of life, believing that the only way to live longer is to control every aspect of their health. Some elderly people, as they approach their 70s and beyond, develop an overwhelming fear of death. They become consumed with worry, wondering if today will be their last, or if they'll be struck by an illness or accident. In the pursuit of longevity, they pour money into expensive tonics, wellness routines, and alternative health practices, hoping that they can stave off time. Yet in doing so, they often neglect the simple joys of life, like enjoying a comfortable home or spending time with family, because their energy is consumed by the quest for more years. There's an old saying, "Birth and death are determined by fate. Wealth and honor are bestowed by heaven." The truth in this proverb lies in the understanding that our time here is not something we can manipulate indefinitely. While it's natural to want to live longer, sometimes we must accept that life's duration is beyond our control. Dorothy's experience shifted when she realized that living a long life without health wasn't as desirable as she once thought. Some people may live to 100, but at what cost? Their children may have passed away before them, and they may end up relying on grandchildren to care for them in their final years, placing a burden on the younger generation that they never intended. I thought about my grandmother, who lived to be 102, but by the end, she was so frail and dependent on others. It was heartbreaking, Dorothy shares. I realized that I didn't want that for myself or my family. Instead of focusing on lengthening her life, Dorothy decided to focus on improving the quality of her remaining years. She stopped worrying about the number of days ahead of her and started enjoying the days she had left. I joined a book club, took long walks in the park, and spent more time with my grandchildren. I stopped chasing an ideal and just embraced what brought me joy, she says. At 70, it's essential to accept that life's true value isn't measured in how many years we live, but in how well we live them. The pursuit of health and happiness should not be about postponing death, but about making the most of the time we do have. A positive, optimistic mindset, combined with the wisdom of age, helps us embrace life as it is, without the obsession for more time. So, instead of worrying about how much longer you'll live, focus on how you can make each day meaningful. Cultivate happiness, health, and connection with the people around you. After all, it's not about the number of years, but the joy in the journey that counts. And sometimes, letting go of the fear of death is the best way to truly live. Fourthly, if your spouse has passed away, there's no need to find someone else. It's too troublesome. After the loss of a spouse, many older adults may feel the pressure to find companionship again. However, as you age, this pursuit often brings more complications than it does comfort. While the idea of meeting someone new might seem appealing, especially when loneliness sets in, the reality is that building a new relationship at this stage of life can be much more challenging than expected. Consider the story of Margaret Davis, who is 75 and recently lost her husband, Walter, after 50 years of marriage. At first, she thought about dating again, but the more she thought about it, the more she realized how much effort it would require. "I thought I'd enjoy having someone around, but I quickly realized that finding someone at my age who is compatible with me, shares the same values, and wants the same things is not easy," she reflects. At this point, I'd rather enjoy my peace than navigate the complexities of a new relationship. As we grow older, our priorities change, and so do the dynamics of our needs. After 70, the energy it takes to nurture a new relationship, especially one that requires compatibility, emotional investment, and communication, can feel overwhelming. There's simply not enough time or energy to devote to building a bond with someone new, especially when you've already had a lifetime of experiences and know what you truly want. The risk of entering into an incompatible relationship only to experience disappointment or heartbreak is a reality that many face in their later years. Another consideration is family dynamics, especially when it comes to grandchildren. Many seniors, after the loss of a spouse, may feel like they need to find another partner for emotional support. However, if your children or grandchildren are not supportive of your choice, tensions can arise. When my mother, who is 82, mentioned dating again after my father passed, we were all taken aback, says Anna, her daughter. We love our mom, but we were worried about her safety, and honestly, we didn't want her to go through the emotional roller coaster of a new relationship at her age. Beyond family concerns, there are also the practicalities of managing finances and assets. Entering into a new relationship can complicate estate planning, property distribution, and even caregiving responsibilities. For many, it's simply easier to live alone, especially when the complications of new relationships add unnecessary stress. Living independently can feel like a breath of fresh air at this stage of life. While loneliness is a natural feeling, it doesn't have to be a burden. Embracing solitude often leads to newfound freedom and a chance to focus on your desires and happiness. Margaret, for instance, found joy in hobbies she hadn't explored in years, like painting and gardening. I realized I can fill my days with things I love, like volunteering at the local animal shelter and joining the senior book club, she shares. The community is full of wonderful people, and I get to live on my terms. There's no one to please but myself. There are countless activities for seniors today, from yoga and dance classes to travel clubs and creative workshops, that provide opportunities to connect with others and stay engaged. These social activities allow you to cultivate friendships and build meaningful connections without the pressures of a romantic relationship. And if you ever feel like staying in for the day, you have the peace to do so, enjoying your own company without worrying about anyone else's expectations. As we age, it's important to recognize that being comfortable in our own company can be one of life's greatest joys. Sometimes a little solitude is the perfect way to regain your sense of freedom and independence. After all, your life is yours to live, and no one else's presence can define your happiness. Fifth, keep your retirement funds. Don't spend them all on your grandchildren. It's a well-known saying that many grandparents will recognize. Love your grandchildren more than your children. The bond between grandparents and grandchildren can be incredibly special. Grandparents often find themselves spoiling their grandkids with gifts, treats, and even financial support, wanting to give them everything they can. However, when you reach the age of 70, it's essential to shift your mindset when it comes to managing your finances, especially your retirement savings. Take the example of Helen Harper, a 72-year-old grandmother who spent her whole life making sure her children and grandchildren had everything they needed. I always thought I should give as much as I could to my grandchildren, she says. But then I realized that if I'm not careful, I'll end up with nothing left for myself when I need it. Grandparents naturally want to support their grandchildren, and there's nothing wrong with giving them gifts or helping out when they're in need. But as you approach your later years, it's crucial to remember that your retirement funds are there for your security and peace of mind, not just to be used for the next generation. Helen's story is all too familiar. After a lifetime of giving, it's easy to fall into the trap of overindulgence, especially when it comes to grandchildren. It's so tempting to give them money for their education or pay for their extracurricular activities, she admits. But I had to remind myself that my retirement is meant to support me, not just them. When you retire, you must rely on the money you've saved throughout your working years. It's not just about maintaining a comfortable lifestyle now. It's about ensuring that you can handle unforeseen medical expenses, potential disability, and any other financial challenges that may arise in the future. If you deplete your savings too quickly, you risk losing that crucial cushion when you might need it most. Many older adults find that as they age, they need to become more aware of their financial choices. Having money set aside for healthcare costs, home maintenance, or any unexpected events that might come your way can give you the peace of mind to live independently and without stress. Without this financial safety net, you may find yourself struggling later on, which is something no one wants to face. Of course, it's natural to want to help your grandchildren, and a little affection through thoughtful gifts or helping with certain expenses is perfectly fine. But before making large financial contributions, take a moment to ask yourself, will this impact my future security? If the answer is yes, it might be time to rethink how you allocate your funds. Prioritize your well-being, your health, your peace of mind, and your ability to live independently. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 2 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Helen's approach now is much more balanced. I still help out when I can, but I also make sure my retirement savings are intact. I don't want to be a burden on my children later on, she says. It feels good knowing I can enjoy my retirement without constantly worrying about my finances. In the end, your retirement funds are your lifeline. While it's wonderful to give to your grandchildren, remember that taking care of yourself is the most important gift you can give to them, ensuring that you're healthy, happy, and financially secure. By setting boundaries and managing your resources wisely, you can continue to enjoy the love of your family without sacrificing your peace of mind. Sixth, there's no need to overly value relatives. Let everyone live without bothering each other, achieving peace and tranquility. When we're young, we're often taught that family is everything. We grow up with the belief that our relatives will always be there for us, offering support in times of need. However, as we age, we may come to realize that blood relations don't always provide the comfort and loyalty we expect. For many, this lesson becomes clearer as life's challenges unfold. Take the example of James Thompson, a 68-year-old man who had always held his family in high regard. Growing up, he was taught to believe that family members were supposed to look out for one another. But during a particularly tough period in his life, when he faced financial difficulties after losing his job, he quickly learned how fleeting those family ties could be. When things were tough, I reached out to my cousins, aunts, and uncles for help, James recalls. But instead of support, many of them distanced themselves. Some even mocked me for my situation. It was a painful realization. James' experience echoes the old saying, when you're wealthy, friends surround you. When you're poor, relatives turn their backs. In youth, it's easy to believe that family will always have your back, but as life progresses, it becomes clear that not everyone feels the same way about those familial bonds. Many people prioritize their interests and are hesitant to offer help, even when you've shared a lifetime of experiences with them. James soon discovered that society has shifted. People may appear close, but in reality, they're often more focused on their own lives than on helping others. At first, it hurt, James admits. But over time, I began to accept that not all relatives will stand by you when things get tough. Some may even turn against you, and that's okay. In our younger years, we might assume that family should always be there for us and that relatives should offer their unconditional support. But as we grow older, we come to value peace and tranquility more than the drama or expectations that come with family obligations. Help when you can, but don't feel guilty if you can't, James advises. At this stage of life, I've learned that maintaining peace is far more valuable than trying to meet everyone else's needs, especially when those needs can be draining or unrealistic. For many older adults, it's about learning to set boundaries and live a life free of unnecessary emotional burdens. If you found that certain relatives cause you more stress than joy, it's okay to step back. There's no need to feel obligated to engage in every family conflict or to play the role of caretaker or provider if it's at the expense of your well-being. James found comfort in embracing a simpler, more peaceful existence. I still love my family, But I've realized that it's okay to live without constantly worrying about what others think, he says. I'm more focused on my peace and happiness now. Ultimately, life after 70 is about choosing peace over stress and tranquility over obligation. It's about realizing that family doesn't always mean sacrificing your own needs. Maintaining your happiness, emotional health, and sense of self is far more important than trying to please everyone. So, let your relatives live their lives, and focus on living yours with joy and fulfillment. 7th, there's no need to compete for fame and fortune anymore. When we're young, it's easy to get caught up in the race for fame, career success, and recognition. We're driven by ambition, working long hours, chasing promotions, and striving to build a reputation that will carry us through life. Fame and fortune become the shining goals that seem to validate our efforts and define our worth. But as we reach our later years, particularly by the time we hit 70, the pursuit of fame begins to lose its luster. What once felt like an essential part of life's journey now seems fleeting, almost irrelevant. Consider the story of Robert Williams, who is 73 and reflects on his younger days with a sense of clarity. When I was in my 30s and 40s, I was obsessed with climbing the corporate ladder, he recalls. I worked 60-hour weeks, constantly on the go, chasing promotions and accolades. It felt like the only thing that mattered. Robert's hard work and dedication eventually earned him a senior position at a prestigious company. But as he approached his 60s and retired, he began to see things differently. Now, Robert has a very different perspective on success. At 70, the idea of fame or recognition doesn't hold the same weight, he says. It's like smoke, here one moment, gone the next. All that matters now is peace of mind. Robert learned that true happiness doesn't come from what we accumulate or what others think of us. Instead, it comes from appreciating the simple joys and the life we've lived. This shift is something many older adults experience. The ambitions that once drove us to work harder and push further give way to a more grounded understanding of what truly brings joy. At 70, we're no longer concerned with impressing others or earning accolades. What we seek now is tranquility, contentment, and the ability to enjoy the present moment. Take, for example, James Peterson, who was once the star of his industry and a key player in his field. When I was younger, it was all about being at the top, James reflects. I didn't think twice about the long hours, the missed family events, or the stress. It was all worth it for the title, the recognition. Now that James is in his 70s, he no longer feels the need to compete. Instead, he enjoys spending his days practicing Tai Chi in the mornings, chatting with friends at the park, and appreciating the serenity of his life. I've come to realize that the work I did and the titles I held don't matter anymore, James shares. What matters is the peace I have now, sitting in the park, listening to the birds, enjoying a good conversation. That's the success I treasure. At this stage in life, it's not about what we've achieved or what we can still accomplish. It's about finding joy in what we already have, our health, our relationships, and our moments of quiet reflection. The need for external validation fades, replaced by an inner peace that can only come with age and experience. So, as you move through your 70s, let go of the competition for fame and fortune. Instead, embrace the beauty of the life you've lived and the freedom that comes with having nothing left to prove. In the end, happiness isn't in what we possess. It's in appreciating the simple, quiet moments that truly enrich our lives. 8th, there's no need to regret the past anymore. As we age, it's natural to reflect on our past, on the choices we made, the opportunities we missed, and the paths we didn't take. For many, these reflections can bring a sense of regret. We think about the roads we could have traveled, the things we could have done differently, and the achievements we might have attained. But as we approach our later years, especially by the time we reach 70, we come to understand that living in the past is not only unproductive, it can also prevent us from fully embracing the present. Take the example of Charles Lewis, a 70-year-old former teacher, who spent much of his life dwelling on a missed promotion opportunity from his youth. When I was younger, I had the chance to move up in my school district, Charles recalls. But there was a misunderstanding between me and my supervisor, and the opportunity slipped away. I carried that regret with me for years, and it clouded my happiness. For a long time, Charles allowed this lost opportunity to hold him back. He couldn't shake the feeling that his career was incomplete because of that one moment. But over time, Charles began to listen to the wisdom of his children, who reminded him that the past could never be changed. My children would tell me, "Dad, it's okay. You did your best. There's no point in living in what could have been." Gradually, Charles started to realize that hanging on to the past was like carrying a heavy weight. It prevented him from seeing the possibilities that lay before him in the present. "Once I stopped regretting that missed promotion, I found a new freedom," Charles says. "I started pursuing things that brought me joy in retirement, like gardening, volunteering at the local library, and spending more time with my grandchildren. It was like I was rediscovering myself." Learning to let go of past regrets is one of the most liberating things we can do in our later years. The truth is, no matter how much we think about it or wish it were different, the past cannot be changed. The time we spend in regret could be better spent in new experiences, finding joy in the things we can control. Charles's story shows us that it's not about what we didn't do, but what we still have the chance to do. At 70, it's important to let go of the emotional burdens we've carried for so long. Instead of wishing for a different past, we can focus on the present and future. By embracing new interests, hobbies, and relationships, we allow ourselves to build a new sense of fulfillment that is not defined by what we missed, but by what we choose to create now. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 3 below to let me know that you are still here with me. Just like Charles, many of us can find peace by releasing the weight of the past and opening ourselves up to new experiences. The regrets of yesterday no longer need to define us. They only serve as reminders that we've learned, grown, and now have the wisdom to live fully in the present. The best years may still lie ahead. 9th, there's no need to regret the past. While some of us are fortunate enough to find peace as we age, it's important to recognize that not everyone experiences that calm resolution. Family conflicts and generational disagreements can make the later years feel especially heavy. These unresolved tensions often weigh on our minds and hearts, preventing us from fully embracing the tranquility that could come with aging. For many, the relationships with children, in-laws, or extended family members can create stress and sadness, overshadowing what should be a time of reflection and joy. Take the case of Ethan and Rachel Mitchell, a young couple in their late 30s, who have been facing ongoing financial demands from Ethan's mother, Linda. Rachel, a kind-hearted woman, had always supported Ethan's family, but over time, Linda's constant requests for money began to strain their marriage. At first, it wasn't a big deal, Rachel recalls. We'd help out here and there, but it slowly became more frequent. Every time we thought we were getting ahead, Ethan's mom would ask for something, paying off her bills, covering car repairs, helping her buy groceries. It felt like we were always behind, and it started to cause tension. Ethan, caught between his loyalty to his mother and his responsibility to his wife, began to struggle. Rachel felt neglected and resentful as their finances became increasingly unstable. It was like we were stuck in a loop, she says. I wanted to support Ethan, but I couldn't keep giving up our financial future for his mom's endless requests. The strain between Rachel and Ethan grew as the financial demands kept mounting. Ethan's mother was unable to manage her finances properly, and instead of taking responsibility, she leaned on them for constant assistance. This left Rachel feeling frustrated and, at times, helpless. The constant pressure from Linda put their relationship in a state of unpredictability, where their finances, trust, and even future plans were constantly in jeopardy. In many families, such conflicts are common, especially when one generation feels entitled to financial help from the younger one. The older generation often sees their children as a safety net, forgetting that the younger generation has its own financial goals and responsibilities. For Ethan and Rachel, The demands from Linda were not only financially burdensome but emotionally draining as well. Their marriage, once full of hope and dreams, was now overshadowed by the daily struggles of managing their finances and their family dynamics. It wasn't until Ethan and Rachel had a heart-to-heart conversation about their future that they decided to set boundaries with Ethan's mother. They realized that their marriage and financial security had to come first. "We finally had to tell her no," Ethan admits. "It wasn't easy, but we understood that we couldn't keep living like this. We had to protect our family." This difficult decision marked a turning point. While Linda was initially upset, Ethan and Rachel's commitment to each other and their future became stronger. Setting that boundary wasn't just about money. It was about respecting our own needs and our own family, Rachel says. "We realized that sometimes saying no is the most loving thing we can do for ourselves and others." For many, family conflicts like these can cast a long shadow on what should be the golden years of life. But Ethan and Rachel's story is a reminder that it's never too late to regain control of your own peace. By setting healthy boundaries, we allow ourselves to protect the life we've worked for, ensuring that we are not weighed down by unresolved family issues or endless demands. While family relationships are important, it's equally essential to preserve your emotional well-being and sense of self. If you find yourself struggling with generational conflicts or family expectations, remember that it's okay to prioritize your peace. Letting go of past regrets and setting boundaries where needed can lead to a more fulfilling, stress-free future. Life is too short to carry the burden of others' demands. Take back your joy and live with intention. Afternoon on a weekend. It was a quiet afternoon, and the old sofa in my mother-in-law's living room sagged deeply as if it had absorbed the weight of many years of family history. The faded family photos on the wall told stories of younger days when my in-laws were full of life, and the warmth of those memories hung in the air like a distant echo. The TV was playing a wedding scene, showing a beautiful bride, smiling as she embarked on a new chapter of her life. But the sounds of the television seemed distant, drowned out by the growing tension in the room. I sat uncomfortably on the old couch, trying to mask my unease. Suddenly, my mother-in-law's voice broke the silence. "How much savings do you two have now?" she asked, her tone low but probing. I immediately tensed, glancing at my husband, Mark, whose eyes were cast down in discomfort. He started winking at me repeatedly, his message clear. He didn't want me to reveal the truth about our financial situation. "We have about $100,000 saved, but we still have a lot of expenses," I replied casually, trying to sound relaxed. "We're supporting our kids, paying off the house and car loans, and the company's been struggling lately. Many people have been laid off, and our salaries have been cut," I added, hoping to deflect the conversation. My mother-in-law gave me a tight-lipped nod, but I could sense she was dissatisfied. She didn't say anything more, but her gaze lingered for a moment too long, her expression a mix of expectation and something unspoken. As I looked down, pretending to adjust the cups on the coffee table, my fingers trembled slightly. The heat of the summer afternoon seemed to press down on me, and the constant chirping of cicadas outside only added to the sense of discomfort. I knew this conversation was far from over, and my husband's unrelenting winks told me that his mother would soon ask more questions. Questions I didn't want to answer. I tried to focus on the good memories, reminding myself of the peaceful childhood I had in a small town with loving parents who, while strict, allowed me to make my own choices. It was that love and freedom that had shaped who I was. In 2011, I moved to the city for university, where I met Mark, honest, hard-working, and from a simple, frugal background. Despite the differences in our families, our relationship grew stronger with each passing year. But as our love deepened, I began to notice the differences between our families more clearly. My parents had always been supportive and understanding of our relationship, but Mark's mother seemed overly cautious and, at times, suspicious of me. I remember a visit to his hometown when his parents would ask us about finances, plans, and family matters. I had an uneasy feeling then, but I shrugged it off, thinking it was just a mother's natural concern for her son's future. Little did I know, her concerns were not just about our well-being, they were deeply rooted in financial expectations. In 2017, Mark and I got married in a simple ceremony, without any extravagant celebrations. Our families agreed on this, and my parents even helped us pay the deposit for our first home, which gave us a stable start. Mark and I worked hard together, and despite a modest income, we were content. In 2019, we welcomed our first child, and our family felt more complete. But it wasn't long before our married life started to face unexpected challenges. Mark's parents, especially his mother, began asking for money more frequently. At first, we didn't mind. We believed that helping family was simply the right thing to do. But over time, I began to feel the strain. My mother-in-law subtly implied that we were doing better financially and should help her son, Mark's brother, Liam, who was struggling financially. Liam, unmarried and with an unstable job, was often the center of her attention, while our contributions seemed to go unnoticed. As the years went on, the requests for money became more frequent, nearly every month. With a growing family and increasing financial pressures, conflicts began to emerge between Mark and me. He was always caught between his loyalty to his mother and his commitment to our family. Every time I saw his mother's favoritism towards Liam, I grew more frustrated. Finally, I couldn't keep quiet any longer. "Your mom always favors Liam," I said to Mark one evening. "We can't keep helping him forever. We have our children and expenses to take care of. We can't keep sacrificing for him." Mark was silent for a long time before he sighed and said, "I know, but I can't say no to her." That was the turning point for me. I realized that my mother-in-law's favoritism was slowly becoming a ticking time bomb in our marriage. Despite knowing the situation was unhealthy, Mark found it difficult to break free from his mother's emotional control. It wasn't just about money anymore. His mother had started pushing us to help Liam with his marital issues, suggesting we pay for his house deposit to help him start a family. This was the final straw. I overheard a conversation between Mark's mother and Liam. She mentioned, "There's not much money. Only $100,000. We need to figure out how to manage it." My suspicions were confirmed. Her true intention was to get us to contribute to Liam's wedding expenses. I shared this with Mark, and although he knew I was right, he still found it hard to say no. After a long conversation, we made a decision that would change everything. We agreed to refuse to pay for Liam's wedding and set clear boundaries with Mark's family. "We can't keep helping with Liam's problems," Mark finally told his mother over the phone. "You and Dad need to figure it out on your own." Though his mother wasn't happy with our decision, she didn't push the issue any further. For the first time, Mark and I felt a sense of relief, an understanding that we had drawn a line. From that day on, things were different. Mark's mother stopped asking about our savings and Liam's issues. Our marriage became stronger as we learned to prioritize our own family's needs. It wasn't easy, but we had taken control of our future. We learned that sometimes the hardest choice is the one that brings the most peace, and by setting boundaries, we had given ourselves the space to thrive. After the difficult decision to set boundaries with Mark's family, our relationship with his mother became clearer. We had made it known that we would still help when necessary, but we no longer felt obligated to meet her demands unconditionally. It wasn't an easy transition, but at least now, Mark and I share a common perspective on how to handle the challenges his family imposed on us. Life, we realized, would not be easy, but as long as we stayed united as a couple, we could weather any storm. Our small family was our world, and nothing, no matter how difficult, could defeat us if we stuck together. However, the toll of family dynamics, particularly the constant disrespect and the feeling of being underappreciated, was becoming evident. It wasn't just the financial pressure from his mother or the favoritism shown toward his brother, Liam. Sometimes, it was even the way Mark, as my husband and the father of our children, sided with his family over me. The silent emotional toll of such situations is something no woman should have to endure, but it's an experience many women face. Sometimes, it's not just the expectations of relatives that weigh us down, but the lack of support from the person closest to us. This realization came to a head one evening after I had already decided to take a drastic step to protect my daughter Lily from the toxicity that had slowly invaded our home. The phone kept ringing, a constant reminder of the chaos that had become my life. I sat in the dimly lit living room of our rented house, holding my phone, watching it buzz with an incoming call from Mark. I didn't answer. Instead, I silenced the call with a soft press of my finger, allowing the sound of silence to engulf me. This is the 10th call today, I thought to myself. My father had called earlier, asking why I had moved out. Why had I taken Lily and left the house we once called home? At that moment, the weight of the decision seemed almost unbearable, but the clarity of it was undeniable. Lily's voice from the other room broke through my thoughts. "Don't worry about Dad, Mom. He only listens to his parents now. Let's go," she said with a maturity beyond her years, as she played with our cat, Luna. The two of them, Lily and the cat, seemed to find peace in each other's company, blissfully unaware of the turmoil that had surrounded our lives. I smiled faintly, reaching down to pet Luna, feeling the soft, calming warmth of the cat against my hand. I held her close, but the sadness in my heart was hard to ignore. I knew Lily was right. Mark had made his choices, and they weren't aligned with our family's well-being. My thoughts turned back to the last few years. Mark and I had met in our 20s, and I had always admired his straightforwardness. He came from a modest background, and I was drawn to his honest, hard-working nature. We built a life together, facing the typical struggles of young love, and when we married in 2010, our lives felt like they were full of promise. I thought we could conquer anything together. When Lily was born in 2013, our little family felt complete. Life was simple, but it was enough. But things changed when Mark's younger brother, Liam, started facing challenges in his own life. Liam was struggling with his job and his finances, and his parents began to lean on us for help. At first, Mark and I didn't mind lending a hand. Family helps family, after all. But as the requests grew more frequent and the expectations became more demanding, I began to feel the weight of the situation. I noticed how Mark's mother always seemed to focus on Liam, showering him with praise whenever he was mentioned. She was indifferent to the help we gave, but when it came to Liam, her face would light up like the sun. "He's young, he needs help," she would always say. I knew it wasn't just about supporting him. It was about keeping him in a position where he would rely on the family, never taking responsibility for himself. Meanwhile, I felt myself growing more resentful. My own needs, my daughter's needs, our family's well-being, seemed to fall by the wayside. By 2020, Mark's parents' requests for money had become a constant. Our financial situation was already stretched thin with the added responsibility of raising Lily and managing our household. I found myself telling Mark, "We can't keep doing this. We have our own lives, and we need to take care of our daughter. Liam's issues aren't our responsibility." But Mark, ever the dutiful son, found it hard to refuse. If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment below to let me know that you are still here with me. Things took a turn for the worse when Liam moved in with us. Mark's parents had insisted it was best for him, as he was struggling at the boarding school, and they didn't want him living alone. At first, I agreed, but what started as a temporary arrangement quickly became permanent. Liam's presence disrupted our family's harmony. He spent his days holed up in his room, only coming out for meals, and even then, he barely spoke. The tension in the house grew, especially between Liam and Lily, who felt like a stranger had moved into their home. But the real breaking point came when Liam started mistreating our beloved cat. I came home one day to find Luna trembling under the cabinet, her fur matted with fear. When I confronted Liam, he dismissed the cat's behavior, saying, "It's just an animal. It scratched me, so it deserves to be punished." I was livid, but it wasn't just the abuse of Luna that hurt. It was the way Mark stood by his brother's actions, refusing to take a stand for our family. That evening, the tension reached its peak when Liam's behavior escalated. He kicked Luna again, and in the chaos that followed, a glass cup was knocked over, shattering and spilling everywhere. Lily was hurt in the process, her hand cut by the broken glass. I rushed into the room to find my daughter crying, her hand bleeding. And there stood Liam, unapologetic, with Mark defending him. When Mark said, "If you don't get rid of the cat, I will," I knew our marriage had reached its breaking point. This was no longer just about a pet. It was about respect, about family, and about boundaries that had long been crossed. I looked at Mark, unable to understand how he could defend Liam's actions while disregarding his own daughter's pain. The next day, I moved out. I rented a small apartment, knowing that it wasn't ideal, but it was safe. It was a place where Lily and I could find peace. Mark continued calling, but I didn't answer. His father, angry and frustrated, left a final message. "If you're not coming home, at least come and do the housework. Don't worry about the cat, just come back." It stung. He never asked how Lily was, never wondered about the emotional toll on us. All he cared about was his grandson's comfort. That night, I sat in the quiet of our new home, contemplating divorce. I had decided to protect Lily, and as much as it hurt, I knew it was the right one. The reality of this broken marriage was undeniable, but I couldn't sacrifice my daughter's safety or my dignity any longer. For years, I had put my family's needs ahead of my own. The sacrifices I made for them, my son, my daughter-in-law, my grandchildren, had become my way of life. I thought that by giving everything, I could earn the love and respect I had always wanted. But the reality was different. The more I gave, the more they took. And when it came time for me to ask for something in return, my efforts were ignored. I was nothing more than a tool to keep the family running, a provider of comfort and support for others, while my own needs went unmet. The final straw came when I realized that I had been living in a place where I was not valued, where my emotional and physical well-being had no place. I had come to a painful realization. If I didn't make a change, I would be stuck in this cycle forever. I had already contacted a lawyer to start the divorce process, though I knew it wouldn't be easy, especially for my daughter. This would be a massive shift for both of us, but it was a necessary one. I couldn't let her continue to suffer in a family dynamic that had become emotionally abusive. I had to protect her, to stop letting her be belittled, ignored, and neglected. Her wounds were still fresh, but I knew time would heal them, just as time would heal my own. When we moved out, our new life began. The rented house wasn't as big or as comfortable as the home we had once shared, but it was ours. Here, we could finally breathe. We could live without fear of being judged or used. We could raise our cat, Luna, in peace without worrying about someone harming it. As the days passed, our moods began to lift. Lily's laughter, once rare and quiet, started to fill the space with warmth again. Mark still called, asking when I would return. He pleaded for us to come back home, but the more he called, the firmer my resolve became. He would always promise things would change, but I knew deep down that things would never truly be different. He was still trapped in his family's web, too afraid to stand up for me, too willing to put them before our family. As much as I wanted to believe things would improve, I knew in my heart that they wouldn't. The decision to separate had been hard, but it was the right one. I was sure that this new chapter would bring happiness for both Lily and me. We weren't perfect, and the road ahead would undoubtedly be difficult, but we had our boundaries intact, and with those boundaries came freedom. No longer would we be weighed down by the demands of others. We could now live our lives for ourselves, making our own choices without fear of judgment or guilt. It became clear to me that sometimes leaving a marriage isn't about giving up, it's about taking control of your own life. When your sacrifices are taken for granted, and your value is determined by how much you give to others, you must make the difficult choice to reclaim your life. And for Lily and me, it was a choice that was worth making. As I settled into this new life, I thought back on the sacrifices I had made, the times I had put others first, only to be ignored. I knew I had given everything I had to my family, but the truth was, it had never been enough for them. The love and devotion I had shown had been met with indifference, and the respect I had hoped for was nowhere to be found. An elderly mother's turning point. But this story isn't just about a woman finding the courage to leave an unfulfilling marriage. It's also about another woman, much older, whose sacrifices had been taken for granted by her own flesh and blood. It's the story of a mother who had given everything for her son, only to be discarded when she was no longer useful to him. She, too, faced the painful decision to let go of the family that had once been her world. The phone rang in the middle of the night. The call woke me up from a restless sleep. I reached for my phone, already knowing who it was. My son's name flashed across the screen. It was 2 a.m., and I frowned, irritated by the timing. I had been struggling with poor health and had barely slept through the night. His call only added to my frustration. "Mom, come to my place for the holiday," his voice sounded rushed, as if he had something important to say, but I could feel the urgency in his tone. Before I could respond, I heard my grandson in the background. "Grandma, please come. We have a room for you." His words were kind, but they felt hollow to me. I took a deep breath, trying to suppress my anger. "It's late, we'll talk tomorrow," I said softly, not wanting to engage any further. I ended the call and saw that this was the 19th call my son had made that evening. His persistent messages over the past few days were not about family unity. They were about something else, something I wasn't willing to entertain anymore. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. My thoughts took me back to last year's holiday. I had accepted my son's invitation to visit for the holiday celebration, hoping to feel included and cherished. But when I arrived, things weren't as I had imagined. The house was crowded with relatives, all of them strangers to me. It was supposed to be a family gathering, but instead, I had become an unpaid servant. Each day, I was up early to shop for groceries, cook meals for the entire extended family, and clean up afterward. Nobody helped. The weight of my exhaustion was unbearable, and to make matters worse, I was relegated to the sofa at night while my daughter-in-law's family took over all the rooms. I lay there, cold and uncomfortable, feeling the sting of being invisible to the family I had once thought I would grow old with. I kept thinking, surely my son would see this and help me. But he never did. His priorities had shifted. I wasn't his mother anymore. I was just another person in the house, someone who was expected to serve and give, without ever receiving anything in return. The way my son had changed broke my heart. He had become someone I didn't recognize, a man who valued his wife's family more than his own mother. After my husband's death, I had poured my heart into raising him. He was a good son, but once he married, everything changed. I had hoped that in my old age, I would be cared for and surrounded by the love of my family. Instead, I was treated like an outsider in my own son's home, ignored and dismissed by the very people I had given my life to. I had once asked my son, "Why don't I move in with you? I am lonely." His response, "It's not that I don't want you to, but your daughter-in-law doesn't like a crowded house," hit me like a slap. I realized then that my son, the child I had raised with so much love, was no longer mine. His loyalty was no longer to me, but to his wife and her family. I had always hoped that one day, my son would change, that he would invite me into his life. But that hope slowly faded as I watched his actions speak louder than any words ever could. My heart ached as I thought back to the days when he was a child, when he would run to me with open arms, trusting me with his life. But now, as an elderly mother, I had come to see that my sacrifices meant nothing. My son was no longer the person I had raised. He had become someone I didn't know. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. I made the decision to stop sacrificing for him, to stop allowing myself to be treated as invisible. I wasn't going to be his servant anymore. I was going to live for myself. No longer would I wait for his approval, his attention, or his love. I was going to find my own peace, my own happiness, and if that meant walking away from him, then so be it. In the early hours of the morning, I sent him one final message. I'm not coming. You have your family. I have mine. And with that, I walked away from the relationship that had held me captive for far too long. I had spent years caring for everyone around me. My children, my family, doing everything I could to keep everyone happy. I had convinced myself that if I just gave enough, loved enough, I would finally feel seen, valued, and cherished. But instead, the more I gave, the more I was taken for granted. It wasn't until I reached my breaking point that I realized I had been living my life for everyone else but myself. The moment I decided to leave, to step away from everything that had been suffocating me, felt surreal. I hadn't just made a decision for myself, I had finally learned to love myself. After years of enduring emotional neglect, it was time to stop sacrificing my peace. As I hung up the phone for what I knew would be the last time, there was an overwhelming sense of relief. I had finally chosen my own happiness over the constant pull of family demands. My son probably wouldn't understand. My relatives might think I was heartless, cold even. But in that moment, I knew that my worth wasn't defined by how much I gave to others. I had spent too many years holding on to fragile family ties, waiting for love, for acknowledgement, and all I had received in return were illusions. The truth was, I couldn't keep waiting for them to change. I had to change. I had to live for myself. As I sat on the edge of my bed, sunlight streaming in through the window, a gentle peace filled me. The house was smaller, simpler, but it was ours. My daughter and I could live without fear, without worrying that we would be judged or taken advantage of. We could even raise our cat, Luna, in peace. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel burdened by the weight of expectations. I had made the right choice. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be challenges, but I had taken control of my own life, and that was worth everything. A mother's decision, letting go of toxic family ties. But my story is not the only one of breaking free. It's not just about me. This is also the story of another mother, an older woman, who reached the end of her rope after years of being used by her son's family. A mother who, in her late years, had been taken for granted and pushed to the edge of despair. Her sacrifices, her years of hard work, all seemed to mean nothing. Her son and his family had made her feel invisible. She, too, had to make the heartbreaking choice to turn away from those who were supposed to love her most. It was late at night when the phone rang. I had just drifted off to sleep when the call startled me awake. My son's name appeared on the screen. It was 2 a.m. I could feel my frustration rising. My health was already deteriorating, and the last thing I needed was a late-night call. "Mom, you have to come to the house for the holiday," his voice was hurried, but I could tell it wasn't about family bonding. No, it was about something else. My grandson's voice came through next, almost pleading. "Grandma, please come. I'll make sure there's a room for you." If you are still watching this video and find these lessons useful, please comment 5 below to let me know that you are still here with me. I didn't have the energy for this anymore. With a sigh, I told him, "It's too late. We'll talk tomorrow." I hung up before he could respond. His calls had been relentless, and I knew deep down they weren't about me or the family. They were about his needs. But I had reached the point where I couldn't give anymore. The next morning, I reflected on last year's holiday. I had gone to visit, thinking that maybe things would change, that I would feel welcomed and appreciated. But when I arrived, the house was overflowing with family. I was expected to cook, clean, and serve, like an unpaid housekeeper. My son didn't lift a finger to help. His wife and her family took over every space, while I was relegated to the sofa. I didn't even have a room of my own. The humiliation of it all settled into my bones. This was supposed to be a time for family, but instead, I felt like a stranger in my own son's house. As I cleaned, as I cooked for everyone, I realized that he had changed. He no longer saw me as his mother. He saw me as an inconvenience, a burden. He had become someone I didn't recognize. It wasn't just the housework. It was everything. I had once believed that my sacrifices would be appreciated, that my role in the family would be valued. But instead, I had become invisible. I had given up so much of myself for my son, for his family, but they had never really cared about me. Not once did my son offer to help. Not once did he show any concern for my well-being. It was always about them, about what they needed, about their lives. I was always at the bottom of the list. Finally, I realized it was time to let go. I was done living for everyone else. I had to live for myself. It was a painful decision, but I knew it was the right one. I packed up and moved out. My daughter and I found a small apartment, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of peace. Finding peace in letting go. I stopped answering the phone calls. When my son called again, asking when I would return, I simply told him, "I'm not coming. You have your family, and I have mine." There was no guilt. There was no regret. Just a deep, profound sense of peace. I had stopped sacrificing my dignity for the approval of others. I was done. The years of putting everyone else first were over. My daughter and I were finally free. We were going to live life on our terms. We didn't need anyone else's permission or validation. Family is supposed to be a source of love and support, but sometimes it's just a source of pain. Sometimes we have to let go of toxic relationships to protect ourselves. My story, just like that of the older mother I've told you about, shows us that there is freedom in choosing ourselves over everything else. The next time my son tried to manipulate me, I wasn't there to take it. I had learned the hard way that, at the end of the day, the only person I can count on is myself. And I am enough. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful story. We've seen how the characters in these stories, mothers, wives, and individuals, came to the difficult, yet liberating decision to prioritize themselves and their well-being over others' expectations. Whether it's setting boundaries with family, learning to let go of toxic relationships, or finding peace within yourself, the journey to self-love and independence is never easy, but it's always worth it. What has resonated with you the most from today's video? What have you learned that you're willing to bring into your own life? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Please leave a comment below sharing one key lesson you've learned and how you plan to apply it in your life. If you like this video, please leave your comment below, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us continue bringing valuable content to inspire, empower, and transform lives. Thanks for watching, and remember, living for yourself is the first step toward finding true peace and happiness. Stay tuned for more, and we'll see you in the next video.